Previously, we wrote a program which shows this query to the user, this text. The problem here is that the user cannot interact with our program, so this area here is not typable. The user cannot enter any text and therefore you cannot process user input just yet. But in this video you learn how to get user input, process it and return processed output to the user. So that will open you to a wide range of possibilities what you can do with Python. So let's start. To get user input, you use the input function. You see, this syntax is similar to this syntax here, but I'll explain more about the syntax in this video in about 3 minutes. So let's focus on the user for now, on the program output. If I execute this program now, at first glance it looks the same, but first of all we don't see that text here which says that the program execution finished or something like that. So the program is in an on-demand mode now. It is waiting for the user to enter some input. So as a user you can click here and enter some input, for example a to do. So you get the string enter to do, you enter the to do and you press enter to submit that text to the program. And there we have this process finished with the exit code 0. But what happened to this user text? Well, nothing happened because we didn't process that. So we just asked the user to enter some input and that's all. So if you want to process something, first you want to save that something in a variable. So that's why we want to save whatever text user enters, we want to save it in a variable, such as user underscore text is equal to that. So now this variable is just like a box where you put in different values, different content. In this case, this box will contain the user text clean the bag. And then we can print out that box, user underscore text. So let's execute this now and see the behavior. Enter to do, throw the trash, enter, and we get throw the trash printed out. So here is what happened. The program starts to execute the script line by line, starting from top and going down to the bottom. So it prints out enter a to do, this is the output of that, and then it waits for input. In the second line, the user enters some input. The input is stored in user text variable, and then you print out that input in the last line. Right, so let's talk about syntax now. What are all these parentheses and quotes? Well, print and input are functions. You see the similarity in syntax. So print has this open parenthesis and this other closing parenthesis. But you can also have print without anything inside, just like we have input. So if I run the code now, you'll see nothing here because print didn't print out anything. However, input is asking for input, so here we can enter some input. Clean the bag, press enter, and user text, actually clean the bag, will be printed out, the content of the user text variable. This part here is known as the argument of the print function in this case. So functions can have 0 or more arguments. The input function, by the way, can also get an argument. So if you delete that text from there and you put it in the input function, enter a to do, and you can also remove print because we don't need it now. So just execute the code as it is and we get enter a to do. So what happens is that the input function is designed to print out its argument on the command line, but also is able to get the input from the user and return that user input. So functions can return a value, and in this case this function will return the user string. So clean the bag, that's the user string or text. Why am I saying string? Well, because text in Python is known as string, so it's a string type. You see, we have functions and we have strings and we have variables, so everything has its own syntax. And whenever something has quotes, it is a string. So it's text that you write, and you can write wherever you want. But these pieces of text which don't have quotes are keywords. So you have to write them as you see them. However, the exception here is the variable. It doesn't have quotes, but still you can write wherever you like. So you can add a number after user, user1 text, and also here, and you're going to get the same output. You can also have underscore as I did here, or you can just have a simple variable like that, text. You cannot have numbers in the beginning of the variable though, that is not allowed. So you'll get an error if you do that. And before I close this lecture, I wanted you to know that it is also possible to store this string in a variable. Let's create a variable called message or prompt, however you like to call that variable, and this would be equal to this string. So cut that out, paste it in here, and then here you write the prompt variable, and things will work exactly the same. So the program is running now. I can stop it and rerun it. Enter the to do, meet Tom, and we get the same behavior. So meet Tom is printed out. Now you could ask, should we do the previous version or this version? Well, this is mostly a matter of preference. Both methods have their own pros and cons. For example, having this variable here adds some code to your program. So now you have 3 lines as opposed to having 2 lines of code. However, having variables like this tends to improve the structure of the program, especially when you name your variables with meaningful names. So prompt, or you could do better and say user prompt and then rename that here, of course, user prompt. So now you know what this is. So it's some text that you are showing to the user. So as a programmer, when you read this code later on, you will understand what's going on, and also other programmers can also understand your code. So you should also be a good citizen and write code which is readable. So this tends to improve readability in your code. You see now input user prompt, and you know that you're showing a message, a prompt to the user. And there's also another advantage which you'll understand later on when you learn how to debug your programs. Having intermediate variables like this. So by intermediate variables, I mean variables which you don't need to write, but you can write as we did here. So having intermediate variables makes it easier to debug your code for errors, because you are doing things step by step. So when you use a debugger, the debugger will like to have more lines of code, so it goes step by step and troubleshoots the issues. So that's the state of our program. Right now it gets input and it returns the same input that it got. Now what's next? Well, I'll tell you that in the next video, so I'll see you there.